Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1044B, and today's date is August 9th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Wealthy Prepare for the Financial Crisis by Constructing Panic Rooms. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I just uploaded an interview with John Rubino. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, so if you go over to YouTube and you type in X22 Report Spotlight, it will bring you to that video, or you can come over to the x22report.com site. Just scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there. Or you can see it on newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, and you can play the interview there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we've been talking for quite a while about the collapse of the economy, talking about how the system's going to break down, how out of all of this, the U.S. government, central bankers, they're going to push war. And we realize that the 0.01%, they've been preparing for this. We know the U.S. government has been preparing for this. We know a lot of the wealthy have built compounds, like on New Zealand, have private airstrips where they can move in and out. And coming out of the New York Post, one of the hottest new trends for the 1% are panic rooms. And the billionaire class, they're becoming more fearful of what is going on around the world. Now, they're worried about financial crisis. They're worried about terrorism. They're worried about war. And what they're doing right now is they're outfitting their homes with ultra-luxe safe spaces that cost up to $500,000. Town and Country notes that as the fear escalates worldwide, foreign royals, cautious executives, they are looking for spots to ride out anything from a terror attack, a natural disaster, or a war. Now, these days, safe rooms are more five-star retreat than cinder block fallout shelters. And some of them are even nuclear proof. The thing is, today they want their safe area to look like the Ritz-Carlton. And we can see right now what they're doing is they're very worried about a financial crisis, a terror event, riots on the street, and war. A lot of these safe rooms, they're outfitted with bulletproof windows, ballistic fiberglass to secure doors against explosions, an air filtration unit to protect against gas attack, and a panic button, all of which creates an area that's supposedly impenetrable, and it will keep the wealthy safe. So if everything is awesome here in the United States and around the world, why are people building panic rooms or outfitting their house with bulletproof windows, making them nuclear proof? Why are they doing this if everything is fine? If the economy is doing fine, like the president says, what would be the purpose? What would be the purpose if there's no war coming? If there's no terror coming to the United States? Because we know what's going on here. The wealthy will always get prepared. They'll always get ready for what is coming. It's the rest of the people that will have to fend for themselves. Because they have the insider knowledge, and the everyday people are listening to the propaganda from the government, the corporate media. Because when the system completely implodes on itself, and even if war is started, we know war is not going to change the outcome of the economic crisis. Because the collapse will still occur. It will just cover it up, where the Fed can come out and say, listen, we're at war. China, North Korea, Russia, they hit the financial systems. We're at war with these countries. So everyone has to sacrifice. You're not going to get food. You're not going to get water. We're going to have to ration. Electric might go out in certain parts of the country. And they'll use this excuse. And they'll use it where they say, hey, the Fed will try to bring the economy back to where it was, but don't get your hopes up. So they're going to do whatever they possibly can. They're going to use extraordinary measures. But while we're seeing all of this, those individuals will be okay. The rest of the population will be out in the streets rioting, trying to get the food, trying to stay safe, trying to get prepared for more of what is coming. And this is why everyone needs to get prepared. Because the government's getting prepared, the wealthy are getting prepared. You need to get prepared. Don't let them trick you. Don't let them tell you this lie and don't believe what they're saying. Because listen, just look at everything they told us. There'll be no boots on the ground in Iraq. Are there boots on the ground in Iraq? There'll be no soldiers in Syria. Do we see soldiers in Syria? If Assad gets rid of his chemical weapons, it's all we want. Is it all they really wanted? No. We're not going to bomb in Libya. How many times did they tell us this? Well, the unity government invited us in so we can bomb. The Affordable Care Act is affordable. Is it really? The Patriot Act is to protect the everyday citizen. No, the Patriot Act was to spy on the people. When have they ever told you the truth? Back in 2008, they told us the economy was fine. The Federal Reserve came out and said they're not forecasting a recession anytime soon. Not even this year. Not even next year. And guess what happened? In the same year they were telling us this, it all crashed. And we can see that's what they do. They lie. They can't tell the truth. For some reason, it's impossible. Now, out in Ukraine, the situation is getting worse. The armed forces of Ukraine, well, they're reinforcing the presence of military equipment and personnel in the Kherson region, which is located on the south of Ukraine, just north of Crimea. And the spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine explained why they're doing this. They need to place military units in this area because of the situation that may arise in connection with possible aggressive actions of the Russian side. Well, if you've been watching the actions of Putin and Russia, there is no aggressive side. Actually, if you look at what they've done over the past couple of years, they've been trying to promote peace, come up with plans to calm the situation down, while on the other hand, the United States is trying to push and push and push for more war. Example, back in 2013, the United States was ready to go into Syria because the alleged sarin gas attack, which turned out to be the moderate rebels and the terrorist groups that used the sarin gas. Assad had nothing to do with it. Well, Russia stepped in and said, listen, if Assad got rid of chemical weapons, would you be satisfied? Well, the United States had nothing else to do here because information was coming out that it was not Assad. The people were not behind this war in Syria. They couldn't get any traction in Congress. So to save face, what they did was say, yes, we'll go along with that plan. In Ukraine, it wasn't the United States that came up with a ceasefire plan, the Minsk I, the Minsk II. It was the United States that created the coup d'etat, was continually pushing war in the region. It was Russia once again. In Syria in 2016, Russia is actually eliminating the terrorist groups. The United States is supporting the terrorist groups. Russia continually says, let's work together. Let's go after the terrorists. Al-Nusra is a terrorist group. Al-Qaeda is a terrorist group. And on and on and on. Give us a list. We won't hit the moderate rebels. We'll only hit the terrorists. The United States, sorry, we can't give you a list. Because they're too intertwined. Well, the real reason is because they support all the terrorist groups. They fund them, they supply them, and they protect them. Now, out in Yemen, what we're seeing there is Saudi Arabia, which is controlled by the United States government central bankers. They have bombed the Yemeni capital, and they have killed, once again, civilians there. They hit a potato chip factory. And civilians have died once again. Now, of course, the United States does not come out and say anything about this. They cover it up. They pretend it didn't happen. But we see the Houthi forces in Yemen. They're making incredible progress. And they are capturing several sites from the puppet government loyalists. And they are making huge gains in the country. Now, of course, the UN came out with a proposal. But, of course, the Houthis had to give up all their weapons. They had to return all the land that they captured. And the Houthis said, no, we're not going to do this. We want our own government. We want the puppet government out of here. And if we're going to agree to this, we need a government that is made up of our people and the puppet government. But they didn't want to come together on this. Because the United States government, central bankers, they want it one way only. Our puppet government, or that's it. Now, out in Libya, we understand that the bombing started at the beginning of August. We knew there was going to be some type of an event. We knew something was going to happen during this month. And we actually had two things happen. The bombing of Libya and the offensive of the moderate rebels, al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, in Aleppo. All while they were talking about peace and ceasefire with Russia. But very interestingly, out in Libya, the United States and Europe, well, they have no plans to rebuild Libya cities or critical infrastructure after they destroy it with all the bombs. So what we're seeing is that both the United States and Europe, they haven't offered any detailed plans for how they're going to rebuild everything they destroy. Well, I know how it's all going to be done, like it's been done in the past. They'll loan the government money. Put them into debt, because this is what the central bankers do. They make money during a war. They make money after the war. It's not about the people. It's about how much they make, and this is what they're doing. Now, of course, as we know, out in Libya, the airstrikes are going to continue. We know that Obama authorized it for 30 days, but we know this is going to go a lot longer than this. We also realize that they said there will be no boots on the ground in Libya, and we already know there are boots on the ground. We know there are special operation forces. We know the U.S. is there. We know the French are there. We know the U.K. is there, and many other coalition forces are in this country. But the U.S. Special Operation Forces, they are providing direct on-the-ground support for coordinating the airstrikes. They're providing intelligence to go after not the Islamic State, but to go after those governments that will not be a part of the unity government, because those governments are the elected governments. The unity government was created by the UN, the United States, and the coalition forces, pushed on the people saying, this is your government. So the people had no say in this. How is this democracy? It isn't. So we have boots on the ground, and they are all over the country providing intelligence for these airstrikes to keep the unity government in power. Out in Turkey, we see Turkey is now moving closer and closer to Russia. But Turkey, they are looking at the European Union, and they will not fulfill its obligation under the deal with the European Union with the refugees if Brussels does not set the date for lifting of the visa regime. So, again, we can see what's happening here. Europe is not going to allow the visa regime, and Turkey is not going to abide by the deal. And we're going to have the refugees spread across Europe. Russia and Turkey, they're looking to restore trade, and they're hoping to do this in 1 to 2 years, because as we know, Putin and Erdogan, they are meeting, and we can see the relationship between Russia and Turkey is getting closer and closer, and the relationship between Turkey and the United States is moving further and further away. Now, as the U.S. continually bombs Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria. What they're trying to do is they're trying to redraw the entire map of the Middle East. They're trying to set up those areas, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, and in Syria, Alawite. And this is all part of the plan. And they won't stop until they reach that goal, because they realize if they do not do this, the petrodollar is once again doomed, because the people, they are rising up. They don't want the U.S. in their countries. So if they can separate everyone, keep everything chaotic and everything compartmentalized, it'll be easier to control. This is their thought process. And it is not going well in the Middle East. The people, because they're fighting for a cause, they are winning. We see it in Yemen. We see it in Syria. We see it in Libya. But we know the United States, the coalition forces, they're in all of these countries. We know that the British Special Forces, they are inside of Syria, and they're not there as advisors or trainers. They're there with their weapons, their equipment, and they are engaged in battle along with the U.S. And we can see right now, Syria is not going well for the United States government central bankers. Russia has been supplying humanitarian aid to Aleppo. They have invited other countries to join in, to help out with the efforts. The United States is standing back saying, nah, I don't think we're going to pass this one up. They don't care about helping the people in the country. They care about removing Assad. And they're losing Aleppo right now. Now, as we know, back in July, the al-Nusra terrorist group separated themselves from al-Qaeda. They changed their name to the Conquest of Syria Front. And we knew right there and then that they were trying to bypass the UN resolution on who is a terrorist and who's not a terrorist. So Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov from Russia came out and said the United Nations needs to update its list of terrorist organizations in due time so that the various groups couldn't escape retribution by changing their names. Again, the United States government central bankers are caught again, because this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to say, okay, to stop Russia from bombing al-Nusra, we will change their names. And they won't be on the UN list anymore. We can bypass it. Well, guess what? Russia's onto them. They know what the neocons do. They manipulate the situation. And changing a name doesn't change the terrorist group. They're still the same group. But this is what they've been doing all along. They've been morphing the moderate rebels into the Islamic State. If the Islamic State is being attacked, they became al-Qaeda. If al-Qaeda is being attacked, they're al-Nusra. If al-Nusra is being attacked, they're back to being a moderate rebel. And that's all they do. They just move them around the chessboard, hoping that no one will notice. And we know the U.S. is continually dropping weapons to all of these terrorist groups. We know the U.S. airdropped weapons into the Islamic State hands. And a very strange story came out where the U.S., well, they abandoned their weapons when they came under fire. Now, it's all over the corporate media, and they're trying to explain away how the Islamic State and the other terrorist groups got the U.S.-made weapons. Well, first of all, the United States have been giving them the weapons, dropping them from planes. And then we see this story come out where they found an ID card and there were weapons along with it. Where did they get this from? So they had to come up with a story to say, oh, the U.S. troops, they were under attack. They let their weapons go. They just dropped them and they ran. Well, if we think back to when the Islamic State first appeared in Iraq, what was the story back then? When the Islamic State moved into Mosul, the Iraqi soldiers dropped all the U.S.-made weapons, and the Islamic State picked them up. This is the propaganda they are using. When they are caught, they make up all of these stories. And then, during this whole entire period, when the Islamic State was growing, there was footage. Actually, the Iraqi generals noticed that the United States was dropping weapons for the Islamic State. Because the Islamic State, al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, they're all part of the proxy army of the United States government central bankers. Now, Israeli intelligence, they intercepted communications between the Islamic State and other various groups where they're planning to hit U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. And this really sounds like a psyop. Because if the Islamic State actually attacks a U.S. airbase, we know right there and then it's a false flag. And what's very interesting is every time these intelligence agencies come out with all these warnings that there's going to be a terrorist attack here or there, you notice they never happen. They only happen when they don't mention anything, or they have no reports of a terrorist attack occurring. And the reason for this is because these are planned from the inside. Remember, the Islamic State, al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, they're all part of the United States government central bankers. The operatives take care of handling the next event. And when it's an inside job, they never have any information. They didn't even see it coming. But they report on all the other propaganda that there could be a terrorist attack here, there could be one here, and it never happens. It's always the ones where they have no information that we see this shootout in San Bernardino, which turns out to be a false flag. We see other shootouts in Dallas. We see other areas in France, in Germany. Because all of these are done and created from within. And they're never going to find the information because they're all in on it. So there's nothing to report. And they need to convince you that we need more laws to secure everything. We need to take more and more of your rights away to make you feel safe. Well, you know what? Provide every single American with a weapon, and guess what? Everyone will be safe from the terrorists. Because if that terrorist, which we know is an inside job, enters a club and every person is armed and pointing a weapon at this terrorist, guess what happens? Nothing. The terrorist would be shot down and nothing will happen. But they don't want you to know that. They don't want people to think in that way. Out in Germany, out in France, people are calling, we want weapons. If there's terrorists running around in the country, we should all have a weapon to protect ourselves, right? Because from their viewpoint, they're saying, don't have a weapon. Let the police protect you. Well, every single time we had a false flag, was anyone protected? If we go along with their story, nobody died, right? If we go along with their story, no, they can't protect anybody. But we know these are false flags. But to many people, this looks real to them. So as we move throughout this year, we're seeing more and more events occur. And as we get closer and closer to the collapse, we're going to see the events accelerate. And then eventually what's going to happen is we'll have the main event. And that is to blame everything on another group, country, to explain away how the entire economy collapsed. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.